Hello and welcome to our webcast for June 22, 2018. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yes. Yes, this one. Okay. And the other one in the corner here is Taylor Hyatt, our outreach coordinator and our policy analysis.
Hi.
Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religion organization by and for people with disabilities and our allowers. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate people with disabilities. So today's topics: religion and disability, tense relationships. And three announcements. Very short, but very important.
Right. Okay.
So Amy Asbrook will help us through this subject.
Yes, I will try anyway. This week we're talking about the often uneasy relationship between organized religion and people with disabilities. Traditional structures, beliefs, and attitudes of many religions clash with the social model of disability based on rights and empowerment. Such clashes can generate conflict when disability rights activists and people of faith work together to oppose assisted suicide and euthanasia, or ASE. Taylor is very active in her Catholic Church, and a discussion she prompted last weekend inspired today's topic. So Taylor's going to be making a lot of
Thank you, Taylor.
Yes. Yes.
Glad I can help.
The Abrahamic religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, arise from Old Testament texts.
Yeah, all of them share 5 first books.
Right, and I didn't understand that about Islam for a long time. I was ignorant. Boy, was I ignorant. Anyway, Old Testament text that features 3 major ideas related to disability. The first is that it's a punishment for bad behavior and a visible sign of a person's moral failings. Yeah, and you get that image.
We must be a very bad failure.
Yes. And you get that a lot in, like Captain Ahab. His symbol of his moral failing is his wooden leg, and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, disability is seen as suffering for the disabled people, our loved ones, and our society to be endured to purify the righteous.
Thank you for us.
Yeah. We have our cross to bear, as it were.
That's a joke.
Yeah. And finally, people with disabilities are objects of charity and a means for others to redeem themselves. So it's not about us, it's about others using us to redeem themselves. Okay. Disabled people are supposed to hope for the physical perfection that is promised in paradise, which we will receive as a reward for good behavior in this life. We should also welcome any opportunity to be healed while we're still alive. Taylor, did you want to comment on that?
Yes. So I had a well-meaning young guy, evangelical Christian, try to pray over me to heal my legs while I'm sitting in Starbucks trying to have a coffee. I told him I didn't need that kind of prayer. My life was great without it. Thankfully, he backed off.
Yeah.
And I think it helped that I was able to respond as someone from a similar religious tradition. Short as I am, he would have had to bend over if he wanted to pray at my eye level. And I hope he saw my cross, and that helped. But sometimes people don't want to leave you alone. The first time I attended church with some evangelical friends, they give you an opportunity to pray with each other in small groups of 2 or 3. And my friend got called away for a minute. I was left with this guy who I didn't really know, and he tried to cast the disability demons out of my legs.
Disability demons, I like that.
He actually went further than that. He asked me what I had. I told him, and then he went to cast the CP demons out of my legs. But my friend and I told him off, and both being women, we got another guy we knew to deal with him. We didn't feel comfortable arguing with a strange man in the middle of the service. And I found out that this guy wasn't known to the pastor either.
Oops. Actually, Disability Demons, that would be a great name for a band.
Oh, gosh.
It reminds me, when I was in college, there was a evangelist, Brother Jeb, who used to make the tour of the campuses, and one of my friends who was blind was somehow came into his line of vision, and Brother Jed did, "You see that man? He's paying for his sins." Anywho, the notion of disability as punishment or as a lesson for non-disabled observers carries through to Christianity in the New Testament. And this shows up in two ways. First, as inspiration porn, where disabled people are praised and considered heroic for enduring the daily suffering that is disability and daring to do anything, everyday activities like shop for groceries or take the bus to work.
So I have...
I see people in my circles do this all the time. It's really common among people of my grandparents' age, so in their 60s and up. But I really like Rabbi Ruti Riggins' rebuttal to this. If I'm so inspiring, what am I inspiring you to do? Right. At the same time, with some people, the answer might still be carry the groceries without complaining, because we're both doing our duty to God that way.
Yeah, exactly. Also, disability is supposed to encourage non-disabled people to count their blessings. There, but for the grace of God go I. This phrase means that if it weren't for divine intervention, the speaker would be in the same lousy circumstances as the disabled person they're commenting on, and so should be grateful. Okay, while disabled people become when disabled people become part of a conservative religious community, they are often perceived as unable to contribute. The only role they can play is as grateful recipient of blessings and favors. Even the common Christian idea of ministering to another person involves a service being done to them, regardless of how the person feels about it. The idea of help is only helpful if the person asks for it, is rarely talked about in ministry. The notion that disabled people should be empowered to assert their own needs and act for themselves or ourselves flies in the face of our role as obedient, quote, children of God. Which, yeah. Yeah, I'm a recovering Catholic, so yeah. Okay, the spirit of inclusion is not always enough to prompt religious communities to open their doors to disabled members. Many older buildings are not wheelchair accessible. Churches which are not obliged to comply with disability rights laws often drag their feet, sorry about that. Churches, which are not obliged to comply with disability rights laws, often drag their feet on making access improvements, such as providing assistive listening systems for hearing impaired parishioners, Braille prayer books, and wheelchair ramps. In traditional Islamic belief, in order to qualify for a religious vocation, the person had to be physically perfect. The active roles in the community as priest, nun, monk, imam, parent, or provider are limited to those without disabilities.
And in communities that place a lot of weight on the idea of vocation or a divine calling, excuse me, like my own Catholic tradition does, there's a limit to the legitimate options you can have in your life. If you're not married or a priest or a monk or a nun or a consecrated layperson, where do you fit? There's no recognized place for the non-vowed single person, whether you choose that life or not.
Right, exactly. It's a very passive role.
Yeah.
But the passive role of disabled people, combined with the patriarchal, authority-driven aspects of religion, also mean that the opinions of disabled people carry little weight, even in matters that affect us directly. For example, in Taylor's congregation, the question recently arose, are we disabled people or do we have physical, intellectual, and emotional challenges? The objections of disabled parishioners to the euphemism challenges were not taken seriously by non-disabled leaders who thought they knew better how disabled people should be identified.
One of those guys, thankfully, eventually changed his mind. So we'll see what the mission statement of our church ends up reading in another 6 months.
That would be good. Please remove all challenges.
Yeah.
Those who try to bridge the gap between the disability rights perspective and traditional religious views of disability have used 3 methods. And this is mostly disability studies scholars and theologians. Some seek to reinterpret the religious texts so they make sense in today's context. So they twist themselves into some pretty fancy knots trying to justify what was said in the religious text and try to make it applicable to today's world.
Yeah.
Some simply reject the troublesome passages as irrelevant to modern times, which kind of makes sense since they
Sometimes
don't
something
apply
changed a little
anymore.
bit. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And some look at the sacred writings as a product of their historical setting. And that kind of makes sense too. So these are not people who take the Bible literally. Another source of friction in the movement to oppose assisted suicide and euthanasia are the conservative policies and political views held by some religious communities. Issues that are important to the disability community, like access to healthcare or supports to enable people to live independently, are often ignored, dismissed, or by our allies in the struggle. As well, conservative politicians often engage in discrimination that disability activists find offensive, like opposing civil rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. And that creates a lot of tension for those of us who are trying to work in coalition. And we, bite our tongues and just keep quiet.
Yeah.
Tensions also arise when religious leaders refuse to recognize the secular and rights-based arguments put forward by the disability community are more effective in convincing the majority non-religious population than moral and theological positions. Instead, they rely on sanctity of life arguments that amount to preaching to the choir and leave disabled people feeling silenced and disregarded yet again.
When we were at the Supreme Court for the Carter case, a newspaper reporter asked me whether my opposition to assisted suicide was mostly religious. I gave him a few arguments, what I knew at the time, and asked him, had I mentioned my faith in any of that while talking to him? He said no. And then I had to tell him repeatedly that Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, who I was there with, was a secular organization. And then I thought I should swap the cross I wear for a starfish pendant, but I lost the starfish.
Yeah. They would have said, oh, she's a pagan, so that's okay. Yeah, it comes not just from the religious folks, but it also comes from the media. They assume that disabled people are puppets of the religious right, and our position is only reflective of the religious right, and that we have no agency of our own, that we're just puppets, and we're being used as props, and that's pretty frustrating.
Yes.
Right, and that even when our religious communities say stuff that doesn't sit with us, we're just going to go along with it.
Right.
It's not always true.
Right, exactly. And when we were in Massachusetts in 2012 dealing with the referendum there, it was very difficult sometimes to deal with the attitude of the Catholic leaders there, because they knew what they knew what was right, and gosh darn it, what was going to go. And to hell with you disabled people. Yeah. The aging of the religious constituency means there are fewer young people, and especially fewer young disabled community members, to rebut outdated ideas of disability and other alternatives, and offer alternatives. For example, some of the stickiest myths about autism are perpetuated by religious people, like that autism is caused by vaccines and that autism can and should be cured. And those cause real damage, those ideas, because it's one thing to go to a faith healer and have somebody chant over you, and it's another thing to force your kid to drink bleach. Okay. An increasing number of disabled people are taking on positions of leadership. Oh, I'm sorry. Fortunately, it's not all bad. Sorry about that. An increasing number of disabled people are taking positions of leadership in their synagogues, churches, mosques, and monasteries. And that's starting to happen, but there's a big hill to climb because of this idea that the body is supposed to be perfect for the person who serves God. And, you know, they don't really want to take on disabled people because it costs too much.
I was going to say, mostly in my case, it's not so much any personal imperfection, but it's how are our facilities going to work for you? We don't want to slow down and listen how you can make it work. Right.
And again, they are not compelled by law to become accessible. So
right.
Why should they? Accessibility in places of worship is slowly improving. Although when I was doing research to find some French links on this, what I found was that actually there's still such a falling number of people who go to church in Quebec that there's less accessibility because there are fewer churches, fewer masses in langue des signes québécoise, and so there's some progress, but there's also some backsliding. Some congregations are using FM systems for worshipers with hearing aids, while others have sign language interpreters during services. Ramps and elevators are being added to more facilities. Treatment of people with intellectual disabilities is also beginning to change as believers move away from labels like God's special children. Okay. Whether they ignore, reinterpret, or look at the sacred texts in their historical context, disabled theologians must redefine what disability means in all the world's major religions. And it's got to come from disabled people, because, non-disabled people, they'll look at it, sure, but they won't do it as good as we will.
I was going to say, they mean well, but they're not going to get everything right.
Yeah, exactly. Step one is to break the link between disability and sin, punishment, karma, suffering, and moral failing.
This is very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult because it's very ingrained and it's based on natural human fear of difference, but we have to do it. A new understanding of disability, characterized by mutual respect and a recognition of interdependence, must be adopted and proclaimed by religious leaders. No, so not just written into a policy and put in the back shelf, and acted upon in every religious community. So that's our hope anyway. And hopefully that'll make it easier to work in conjunction with people of faith. Okay, we have 3 announcements. First is that the webcast is going on a summer hiatus and will return on August 24th.
Yeah.
Yay, not that we're going to be not working. We're going to take
We're-
vacation, but we're also going to be working on bigger projects.
Yeah, we are working on a very deeper manner.
On infrastructure and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so second announcement is that the Minister of Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities, Christy Duncan, tabled Bill C-81, an act to ensure a barrier-free Canada, also known as the Accessible Canada Act, on Wednesday. We haven't had time to evaluate the bill, which so you can watch for our commentary later in August.
Okay, if the project is as good as the title,
yeah.
it will be very good. But
the problem is that the federal government doesn't have much jurisdiction over life in general and commerce.
yeah,
so
that's province who are responsible for everything with social and education
Right.
and health.
So
and
it
so on and
doesn't
so on.
it doesn't have a very far reach, basically. Finally, the Government of Canada released its third interim report on the assisted suicide and euthanasia program on yesterday. The total number of people who've died under the program is 3,714. That's not actually an accurate total because that doesn't include some figures from Quebec and the territories, which seems a really large number.
Oh yeah.
You know, this is exceptional cases, 3,714 exceptional cases.
Yeah, it's quite a lot.
How many exceptions do you have before it's not an exception anymore?
Exactly.
Yeah, so the slight slippery slope is
Yep.
every day.
Yeah. We haven't had time to go through that report either, and we will tackle it in August when we come back as well. So, if you have any questions on the matters that we discuss here, you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujourvivant, not dead yet, and we will be updating our Facebook page regularly throughout the summer. So keep an eye on it. You can go to our website at tvndy.ca, and we're going to be overhauling our website this summer as well. Or you can follow us on Twitter. Oh, you can also send us an email at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christian for helping out, and
Thank
to
you,
Taylor as
Amy.
well
Thank
for
you,
the
Taylor.
topic this week. And we will see you later.
Somewhere by
August
the 24th.
24th.
Yeah. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.